Hello, my name's Gary Ford, Managing Director of Tiger Hobbies Limited, UK hobby importers and distributors in the UK. In the next episode, we shall look at Montgomery's assault on the Rhine at Wesel, Operation Plunder, and the costly airborne drop, Operation Varsity, the last great paradrop in the West. So welcome to episode 7. General Montgomery stated, against Operation Veritable, German paratroopers' fanaticism was unexcelled at any time during the war, and the volume of fire from enemy weapons was the heaviest so far being faced by British troops in all of the Northwest European campaign. The toughest of battles prepared the way for the assault across the Rhine by British 2nd Army under General Dempsey and US 9th Army under General Simpson, and the 9th Canadian Infantry Brigade. Operation Plunder would be massive, over 1.2 million men, plus over 5,000 guns and thousands of tanks, plus a massive one-day drop of paratroopers from US 18th Airborne Corps, consisting of 6 British Airborne Division and US 17th Airborne Division. What a party! But someone's out to spoil Monty's party. No other than General George S. Patton, who stated in so many words to his staff, "I'm not letting that limey son of a bitch be first across the river. Officially, let it be known that 3rd Army is across before Monty." Preparation for the 16th of March with massive smoke screens prepare for the actual assault on the 23rd of March. This would include 36 Royal Navy LCVP and LCM landing craft, plus gain huge numbers of our favourite LV-24 water buffaloes, plus pontoon bridges ready to assemble as soon as the first bridgehead was secure. Any excuse to show a bit of one of my favourite war movies, the bridge at Remagen. So, before this turns into the Monty and Patton show, other folks called the US 1st Army leading elements on the 7th of March found a massive bridge, the Ludendorff Bridge, still intact. Soldiers of the 27th Armoured Infantry Able Company, led by Lieutenant Karl Timmerman, rushed the bridge after explosive failed to destroy the actual bridge, and Sergeant Drabick, a squad leader, was the very first Allied soldier to cross the Rhine in open assault. In the clip behind me from the movie Bridge at Remagen shows the M24 Chaffe tank that did enter service with the US Army during the Battle of the Bulge, rushing the bridge. It's a little fast for reality, but great to watch. After a short period isolated on the eastern part of the bridge, Timmerman unit was at last joined by other soldiers, and soon the very first tanks were crossing the bridge, and within 24 hours, 8,000 troops and many tanks across the bridge, giving a decent bridgehead on the eastern banks of the Rhine. Thousands would cross before the bridge finally collapsed on the 17th, but by then the US Army had built a massive pontoon bridge. The famous sign seen in the clip, "Cross the Rhine with dry feet," courtesy of the 9th Armoured Division. On the 22nd of March 1945, General George S. Patton, 3rd Army, still had the opportunity to get one over Monty and rushed the division up to the Rhine at Oppenheim with the blessing of 12th Army Group Commander General Bradley, still pissed off at Monty for "I've saved the Americans during the Battle of the Bulge." He told Patton, "Take the Rhine on the run." "I will," says Patton, "but get me some goddamn gasoline for my tanks." Patton's 5th Division crossed the Rhine late on the 22nd by assault boat, becoming the first army since Napoleon to get into Germany via boat. 2 days later, on the 24th, a pontoon bridge had been built, and Patton decided to relieve himself in the river and asked photographers to make sure they got the picture. So, if you want to go online, you'll find a picture of Patton pissing in the Rhine. But not for my video, I'm trying to keep it fairly clean. Once his tanks were full, within 3 days, Patton was racing towards Frankfurt as the Germans were falling apart and could see the writing was on the wall in the west. Back up north, Monty's 21st Army Group would face a tougher time at Wesel, but would go in with massive overwhelming force. Just prior to the assault, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill arrived at Monty's forward HQ at Venlo before moving forward to observe the assault on the Rhine. Lead formations were the British 12th Corps, British 30th Corps, US 16th Corps, plus again 79th Armoured Division with its specialist armoured vehicles, plus Buffaloes, this time operated by the 4th Royal Tank Regiment. Before the first assault troops crossed late on the 23rd of March, over 5,000 guns opened up on the Germans. I'm playing this clip with sound just so you can hear the guns play out. This went on all night, and the assault boats carrying men of the 51st Highland Division, 7th Battalion Black Watch crossed the Rhine, followed by the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, plus early on the 24th of March, the 15th Scottish crossed between Wesel and Rhys, and the British 1st Commando Brigade moved south-east into Wesel itself. Other than machine gun nests, resistance was fairly minimal, but mortar fire started to rain down, killing the 51st Division's Major General Rennie, the most senior casualty of the operation. The US 30th Infantry, along with the 79th US Infantry Division, were also across the Rhine south of Wesel, and by the evening of the 24th, they had built their first of a number of pontoon bridges, and the tanks and heavy equipment were starting to cross. British commandos, both Army and Royal Marines, were crossing in boats and Buffaloes, using both as air guns to fire red trace to mark their way, while 250 Royal Air Force bombers hit Wesel after Pathfinders accurately marked the target. The leading commandos was just half a mile from the bomb line, a remarkable feat of trust and training, and very accurate bombing by the Royal Air Force. The commandos entered Wesel early on the 24th. The RAF had done such a job that Wesel that any marks were basically useless, as nothing was left standing. While the airborne landings were going on, British artillery stopped and the Germans counterattacked, but the commandos beat them back, and by the afternoon of the 24th, Wesel was secure. To prevent German counterattacks and artillery hitting the bridgehead, a massive one-day airborne assault called Operation Varsity would take place at approximately 1000 hours on the 24th. This will be 16,000 airborne troops in 1,500 transport aircraft, including the new C-46 Commando, much used C-47 Skytrains, or Dakota as it's known by the British, plus some 1,300 gliders with infantry and light vehicles and guns. This time they would land just far enough to be out of Allied medium artillery, but not so far they could not link up with ground forces within a day or so, if not that day. Churchill came forward to see the paratroopers landing at a distance, but the Germans had massive flak batteries in the area and no amount of Allied fighter cover could protect them. Close to 100 transport and gliders were destroyed or damaged before they could get their troops into action. But once the paratroops and glider-borne troopers got into action, things went much better. Intensive fighting with German troops, including tanks, did inflict many airborne casualties. But all objectives were taken, and unlike Arnhem, ground forces linked up hours. In fact, 15th Scottish Infantry Division had linked up with 6th Airborne by nightfall on the 24th, just 14 hours after landing. Airborne casualties were about 2,500 out of a landing force of some 16,000, and the Germans, they lost quite a few, but they lost at least 3,500 prisoners of war. On the 29th of March, with the bridgehead more secure, Eisenhower, Montgomery, Simpson, CIGS Brooke and Churchill came to the Rhine to watch the masses of Allied armies crossing the Rhine in what was a fairly safe area. After lunch and Eisenhower's departure, Churchill insisted on going to the east bank of the Rhine and took an LCVP landing craft along with Monty, Simpson and Brooke and stayed basically in enemy territory for some 30 minutes. German artillery and mortars was getting pretty close, so they quickly went back across the Rhine. North of Rhine, the Germans were continuing fierce fighting, and the Canadian 9th Infantry Brigade relieved the Black Watch, who'd suffered a good number of casualties. Also, Germans tried armoured counterattacks, but they had so few tanks that were quickly dealt with. And more heavy units were crossing to the east side of the Rhine. Though beaten crossing the Rhine by 1st Army and Patton's 3rd Army, Montgomery's detailed planning resulted in an almost flawless operation. And by the 28th of March 1945, just 5 days after the first crossing, the 12 pontoon bridges had been built across the Rhine near Wesel. A bridgehead of some 35 miles long and 12 miles deep allowed the British 2nd Army and US 9th Army to gather to start the push into Germany, and the end of the war in Europe was at last now in sight.